In the last 24 hours, the world cracked open. A virus with no vaccine just jumped a border. A man who plotted October 7th was wiped off the map. Oil hit $109. The Dow bled 500 points. And a U.S.-Iran ceasefire is, in Donald Trump's own words, on massive life support. You scrolled right past it. Tonight, I'm pulling every thread together. Sit down. This one matters. Friday evening, Gaza City. An Israeli airstrike levels a residential block, and the most senior military commander of Hamas is suddenly gone. Is al-Din al-Haddad, identified by the IDF as one of the architects of the October 7th attacks that killed roughly 1,200 Israelis and saw more than 250 taken hostage, died alongside his wife and his daughter. 7 people killed in that single strike. More than 50 wounded. The ceasefire just got a body count it never asked for. Why does this strike matter beyond the headline? Because al-Haddad was not a foot soldier. He took over Hamas's military wing after Israel killed Yahya Sinwar in 2024, and Israel says he ran the strategy that turned a single morning into the longest war Gaza has ever seen. Hamas confirmed his death within hours, and every analyst is asking the same question. Does this end the war faster, or light a brand new fuse no one wants? While that bomb was falling, another emergency was quietly snowballing in Central Africa. The World Health Organization, on May 16th, declared the new Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of the Congo a public health emergency of international concern. 248 suspected cases, around 80 suspected deaths. Ituri province is the epicenter, and a Congolese traveler has already died of Ebola in Kampala, Uganda. That is how a regional outbreak quietly turns into a continental one. Here is the gut punch detail. This is not the Zaire strain the world finally built a vaccine against. This is Bundibugyo. There is no licensed vaccine. There is no specific therapy. Frontline doctors are running on supportive care and prayer. The WHO is scaling up response teams. Health workers are racing into remote villages with no roads, no clinics, sometimes no electricity. And the clock that started ticking a few weeks ago just got dramatically louder. Now flip your screen to Wall Street, because Friday closed ugly. The S&P 500 dropped 1.24% to 7408. The Nasdaq fell 1.54. The Dow shed 537 points. The 10-year Treasury yield jumped to 4.55%, the highest reading in a year. Translation: bond traders are pricing in the very real possibility that war and inflation force the Federal Reserve to hike interest rates again. What spooked them? Oil. Crude raced to $109 a barrel. The head of Saudi Aramco warned that if the Strait of Hormuz stays disrupted, the global market loses around 100 million barrels every single week. By summer, gasoline and jet fuel could hit, in his words, critically low levels. That is not a forecast for next year. That is a forecast for your next tank of gas, your next plane ticket, your next grocery run. Because here is the backdrop nobody is asking enough about. The U.S.-Iran war has been hot for almost 11 weeks. Donald Trump told reporters the ceasefire is on, quote, massive life support. After Tehran sent a counteroffer, he labeled totally unacceptable. Translation again, the off-ramp is closing. Every hour the Strait of Hormuz stays contested is another hour the global energy map is rewriting itself in real time, with American consumers picking up the entire tab. Meanwhile, the U.S. president just flew home from Beijing. He brought a delegation that read like a Forbes cover. Apple's chief executive, Tesla's chief executive, 16 Fortune-level CEOs in matching suits. The mission was massive. The optics were grand. The outcome? He left China without an agreement on Taiwan, without an agreement on Iran, without an agreement on the Strait of Hormuz. The 3 things that mattered most landed in the no-deal column. Markets noticed, and markets sold. Across Eurasia, Russia and Ukraine just made the war ledger uglier. A Russian cruise missile flattened an apartment building in Kyiv in one of the deadliest strikes on the capital in 4 years of fighting. Hours later, Ukraine fired back. One of the largest drone barges of the war killed at least 4 people, including 3 near Moscow, and wounded around a dozen more. This is not a frozen conflict. This is an accelerating one on both sides. Then, on the same day, the European Union dropped sanctions on Russian officials and institutions accused of running the largest child deportation scheme in modern European history. The number that floored me: roughly 20,500 Ukrainian children unlawfully deported or forcibly transferred since the 2022 invasion. Separately, UNICEF reported that 70 Palestinian children have been killed in the West Bank and East Jerusalem since early 2025, with another 850 wounded in that same window. Pull the lens back. In one 24-hour window, the world saw a top militant commander killed, a vaccine-less Ebola strain declared a global emergency, oil over 100, Wall Street bleeding, a U.S. president flying home empty-handed from Beijing, missiles in Kyiv, drones over Moscow, and a continent-wide child welfare crisis put on paper. Any one of these would normally dominate a news cycle. They happened in parallel. Most viewers saw maybe one of them. 1. Now let's talk tech. Because the same day Wall Street tanked, the AI bubble somehow flexed harder than ever. Wafer-scale chip maker Cerebras went public, surged 68% on its NASDAQ debut, and hit a $95 billion valuation before lunch was over. Friday's open knocked the stock back about 2%, but the message was already sent. Investors will still pay anything to own the picks and shovels of the AI gold rush, even mid-meltdown. OpenAI, not to be outdone, quietly unveiled a brand new deployment and consulting arm called DeployCo. Backed by Bain & Company, Capgemini, and McKinsey, the unit launched with a $10 billion pre-money valuation. Read between the lines. OpenAI isn't just selling software anymore. It is selling transformation contracts, the same kind that built Accenture into a $60 billion machine. AI is no longer a feature you toggle on. It is now a multi-year, board-level overhaul that arrives with a consultant's invoice. And yet, the public is not on board. A new Gallup survey released this week found that 71% of American adults oppose having an AI data center built in their local area. 48% strongly oppose it. Think about that. The very infrastructure powering every flashy demo, every Wall Street pop, every productivity slide deck, the country does not want it in its backyard. The AI boom has officially run into a giant NIMBY wall. Asia got its own thunderclap. Samsung Electronics, the silent giant behind a huge chunk of your phone, your TV, and the world's memory chips, is staring down an 18-day strike that begins May 21st. More than 45,000 workers walking out. The trigger? Unequal bonuses tied to the soaring AI-driven profits of Samsung's memory division. Workers who built the boom say they are not seeing the boom. If they hold the line, expect chip prices to twitch globally. Boeing also had a rough Friday. Shares dropped 2.8% to $222.70 after reports surfaced that an order coming out of the Beijing trip was significantly smaller than the 500-plane deal investors had quietly penciled in. Fewer wide-bodies sold means less revenue, less pricing power, and one more sign that the geopolitical reset is now translating directly into corporate cash flow. The market does not forgive. It reprices. But the same 24 hours also delivered the lighter, weirder, very human stories that flew under the noise. In Basel, Bulgaria's performer Dara stunned bookmakers and bested 24 other nations to win the 70th Eurovision Song Contest, even as protesters massed outside the arena. In Laurel, Maryland, jockey Paco Lopez rode Napoleon Solo to win the 151st Preakness Stakes, the colt's very first victory of the year, a feel-good moment stitched between sirens. Why am I stacking all of this on you in one video? Because the algorithm sliced it up. It fed you the Hamas headline if you watch politics, the Cerebras chart if you watch tech, the oil number if you watch markets, and almost certainly never showed you the Bundibugyo strain that has no vaccine. The 24 hours that shook the world were already on your phone. They were just buried on different apps. And here is the thread that ties everything together, if you squint hard enough. Every story I just walked you through, Gaza, Iran, Ukraine, oil, AI, Samsung, Boeing, Ebola, ends with the same single word. Capacity. Capacity to make peace. Capacity to make energy. Capacity to vaccinate. Capacity to build chips. The world is running this decade at the absolute edge of its capacity, and any one shock can ripple. Friday, we got several. Saturday, we are just counting the bills. So now I want your take. Of everything you just heard, which story do you think will still be making global headlines 6 months from now? And which one will quietly disappear because someone, somewhere, wanted you to forget? Drop your pick in the comments. The story you choose says more about how you see this decade than any anchor on cable. I will read every single reply. Hit that subscribe button if you want the next 24-hour debrief. Hope you got something out of this. Hit subscribe for more in this lane, and we'll see you in the next one.